morning or good evening or whenever you happen to be listening to this week's edition of the KnightShift Podcast. No, I am not the illustrious Steph Sharon. I am, of course, Kyle Nash, who's doing the game, sitting in for him. He's on assignment for this particular week. But we are back this week after taking a break. The hiatus and all that happy stuff. So welcome into this December edition. To go over here for your fun time here with the Knights. UCF for one, getting placed in a bowl game officially, achieving the goal of being bowl placement in the Big 12. I know that holds more weight for some than others. No offense to my guy, Eric Lopez, who is on the panel tonight, along with Nick Porcelli, who will be bringing with us some basketball action. And who knows what may happen throughout the time here. Of course, we are recording this on Thursday night, December 7th. Accounting for the fact that other things may change as we're in that time of year where two things happen. A, basketball season is fluid, and B, there's a whole lot of stuff going on with recruiting already in football coming up. Signing day, of course, being the coming Wednesday. And then, of course, mentioning Eric Lopez, the Sultan of Stickball himself, we definitely got to get a little bit of reaction from the schedules for those particular sports as well. But, gentlemen, let's lead in with this. The placement of the bowl game. Eric, I alluded to it earlier that it may not be your major bowl. It may not be the one that's going to get national allure or attention, but it is one where UCF will be playing a Power 5 opponent in Georgia Tech. Of course, I mentioned the Gasparilla Bowl on December 22nd there. Obviously not breaking down the game yet. I'm sure we'll be doing that in a pod here in 2 weeks from now. But just your general reaction to the placement of the bowl in question.
Well, let me first start with the way Sunday played out, which was crazy day. It was a bizarre day, not necessarily a good day for the sport, but one in particular because Brett McMurphy and other outlets started leaking it out that it was going to be UCF Duke at Gasparilla Bowl, which I just flipped out. Like, I couldn't believe that we were like, really? You guys are that lazy? We're going to have a rematch of a bowl game from last year. You guys know this because I was not a good place when that was during that time frame. All right. And I'm like, this is a joke. This is a mockery. Then there was speculation that they're going to try to work out a trade where Duke ends up Syracuse, maybe, who's in Boca, comes down to Gasparilla. Eventually, it ends up being Georgia Tech and Duke that trade. Georgia Tech comes to Gasparilla. Duke goes to Birmingham because Duke didn't want to play this game. Remember, Duke does not have a head coach that will, because Mike Elko went to Texas A&M. And their quarterback, Riley Leonard, entered the transfer portal. But they don't want to play this game either. And I guess part of this was the ACC was in scramble mode because they thought Florida State was going to be in the playoff. It was a big mess, basically. So it ends up with Georgia Tech. So I actually feel a lot better how this played out for UCF from the standpoint of I think this is a way better situation, more interesting than if you would play Duke, even though some UCF fans were like, oh, I'd rather play Duke because that's an easier game because they don't have their coach. Like, what kind of attitude is that? Oh, it's an easier game than a bowl game. Give me a break. Give me a quality, interesting game. And this does bring storylines into it, and intrigue that you would not have had with any other matchup. I think all things considered for UCF at 6-6, this is probably the best you can do.
No, I kind of agree with a lot of that. Nick, is there anything else you'd add to what Elo's dropped there?
I mean, nothing really. I mean, he pretty much just said it on paper. Couldn't ask for much better if you're a UCF fan. Power 5 conference, and it's close. I mean, when I was talking with Coach Malzahn at the presser earlier this week, I forget the exact wordage to use, but I'm pretty sure it's how the tickets that UCF is selling to its fans, that's all sold out. So clearly, it's close, so a lot of fans can go. So, all in all, he could do a lot worse. So I'm happy with it.
For all the complaining you see on the social medias about the selling of the tickets and things like that, to see UCF fans still sell out their allotment, which I got to tell you, if you follow Gasparilla Bowl, history at all, I think, and the number may be different now, but it's been a number of years ago, but including obviously the Gator game 2 years ago, the Gasparilla, as it was dubbed by our own friend of the podcast, Andrew Glukov. That's like the top I think 4 of the top 5 games in seating attendance were UCF adjacent or involved, right? So I think that's a big factor of why UCF got placed there. I would make this argument, Eric Lopez, and let me know what you think here. Nick, feel free to jump in. I would have preferred Duke from the only standpoint that, and not this easier game crap, I'm with you. That's straight garbage, Lopez. I'm with you. That's just a bad take by whoever says it. But for my money, Duke at one point in the year was ranked, albeit in the, incredibly weak and just unworthy ACC, the conversation we've constantly had.
Yeah, the ACC that has more bowl teams playing in bowl games than any other conference, that ACC.
Yeah, the one that has so many 6-6 teams, they can fill the gaps left by the SEC.
One of them being in this game.
No, all of the above being, none being in this game this time. I like it. That's funny. But with Duke, they were ranked at one point. I think that looked better on the proverbial resume and for PR and all that other stuff.
I don't know. Now, not whether you have an interim coach and a backup quarterback play. I think that if Duke was at full strength, I would hear that.
Okay.
But not at where they're at statewide now. And I think part of the reason why a lot of UCF fans are buying tickets, remember, Frank Key, the head coach at Georgia Tech, used to be the assistant at UCF, was the coach in waiting. That was in his contract. He was going to follow George O'Leary unless, the program went straight to bleep, going winless in 2015, which basically they forced Danny White to clean house, everybody to clean house, really, literally. Otherwise, I think if UCF goes 6-6 that year or 7-5, probably Brent Key would have been the head coach in 2016. So you have that familiarity, the O'Leary Bowl. I mean, the bowl game's already announced they're going to honor George O'Leary at the game. So I think there's that intrigue that you would not have gotten, Kyle, with Duke at all, outside of, hey, Johnny Dawkins is our coach. We already did that last year.
Yeah, the whole revenge thing, I get you. That's kind of a tired storyline compared to how it was. I mean, just take the Oklahoma game as an example, right? Jeff Labby involved with that. The whole thing, I mean, obviously you won't have a former player quarterbacking against his former team like Dylan Gabriel, but, you have those other things. The Brent Key thing, I think, is a storyline that will obviously get play, make the game more interesting. Nick, I think you made the point that it would be, air quotes, easier to travel, as easy it can be, at least on Friday, December 22nd, the eve of Christmas Eve. Oh, wait, the eve of Christmas Eve. There we go. I put too many eves on the first one. The punchline is, I for what UCF was, I'm not mad about this. One could argue that it's possibly one of the more interesting games that are happening in the state amongst all the bowls. That's certainly one road that can be taken. But at this time of year, as we lead into bowls, you hear a lot of coaches talking about the extra practices, the extra effort, how much bowls are worthy for recruiting. Part of the day and time now is trying to recruit for your own team, and already one significant UCF starter out the door, Corey Thornton. Nick, in your mind, we've been talking about a lot of the defense here this past season. Corey Thornton, what kind of impact, what do you see happening there?
He was the guy I was hoping we would be able to hold on to. I really, I don't know what else to say. That's a huge loss. Like, I was expecting huge losses. I don't think it's been as bad as it was last year, which, if you guys remember, it was like, oh my God, everyone's leaving us. But still, that one hurts. That hurt a little bit. I sulked on that for a few minutes after I read that social media post. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. The guy was a leader, both like on the field and off. You don't have that. I mean, who knows what happens? That's a big loss for that team. And just sounds like I'm simplifying it, but someone's going to have to step up and replace him now.
Well, I mean, what else is there to be said? We are well versed that the portal giveth and taketh away, right, Eric? I mean, seeing somebody leave is not unexpected. I forgot to mention an offensive name too in Jordan McDonald. But I don't think anybody's really shocked about that. I mean, he's looking for more PT as a talented running back, obviously. But Eric, Corey Thornton, I get that he's a loss, Nick. But Eric, I feel like it could be worse. Am I wrong?
Well, it's early. We're recording this Thursday night. There's still time between now and when the transfer portal closes on this. Look, Corey Thornton's a loss. I think he was the best defensive back on the team. I know you're not a fan of the Pro Football Focus, Kyle, but he did grade out for the season as the best defensive player on the team at a 76.6. And when we talked about all the issues with defense this year, we never heard Corey Thornton being an issue, right? Like he was pretty consistent, had his best year of his career.
Yeah.
And now he's probably going to go and get some good NLL money. And I say that because that's college football, today's landscape now. And Kyle, you know this from covering the NFL. This is almost like an NFL, Major League Baseball, pro sports style now, where you're going to probably lose some guys, especially in UCF's situation, because you can't afford to keep everybody, right? Like maybe in the SECs, the Alabamas of the world and the Georgias of the world and the Michigans and the Ohio States of the world, they can probably pick and choose who they want to keep. And then, whoever does, is not good enough for them, they can let go. But that's not the case here at UCF with the current financial structure. That's where we're at. So, it's no secret. UCF's trying, obviously hoping that RJ Harvey comes back for another year, as well as your wide receivers and all that. You mentioned Jordan McDonald, but as a result, Corey Thornton's like, yeah, I think I could get more somewhere else and maybe get a bigger profile. Whether you agree with it or not, whether it works out or not, who knows? But that is part of the landscape now, Kyle, don't you think, where you almost have to pick and choose? And I'm not saying UCF didn't want to keep Corey Thornton. I'm sure they tried, but at the same time, you can't overspend. Kind of like, right? You know what I'm saying? I think that's just is what it is. You're going to lose people no matter what.
Well, and listen, I appreciate you giving me credit that I know how it goes based on my time, writing for the Jaguars and all this other stuff, even your Dolphins at one point in the not too distant past. But listen, take it from a source that's in it. Gus Malzahn has used the term, it's like NFL free agency. So you ain't got to appeal to me. Coach is on record understanding that that's the Jazz with that particular piece. And I think there's another aspect in mind that doesn't get talked about quite enough, unless there's an actual recruitment made. But how much former teammates are part of the process that is in the recruiting, I think, right? If one player goes, they'll have a buddy that'll probably follow, right? We've seen that sort of thing. Or, obviously former coaches, that's not a surprise, Gabriel following his former offensive coordinator, all that other stuff. That's less surprising. But at one point, having Ryan O'Keefe being followed by a guy like Thomas Castellanos, who, by the way, made a heck of an impact and possibly impacted the Seminoles by nearly beating them in a 30-29 game where FSU squeaked by that nobody's talking about. But I say all the above to say this, like that aspect, I think, is the one piece we're missing, is having former teammates and their factor in the recruitment. That comes up a lot more than I think we give credit.
Well, here's the quote that Gus said in his presser Tuesday. Okay, here's the quote. I was looking for it. He goes, you have to have money to compete. You have to have money to compete. He was asked at the end of that presser, how are the resources? And he said, do you have enough resources? Or whatever, paraphrasing the question. He goes, we're working on it. That tells you all that you need to know. And obviously, it's not an accident that UCF, Corey, UCF's been pushing the kingdom thing. I don't want to get into the kingdom thing because, to me, that's a situation that it's a no-win situation. I see both sides of it. I understand UCF's trying, the kingdom, they got to get money, and hey, this is the only way we can compete and keep players. But at the same time, I also understand that fans got to pay bills. Okay, yeah. There's house bills to pay. There's a real world out there. And I don't think I would question a fan whether they paid or don't pay at all. And I just think unfortunately, we're in a tough situation in college athletics. And I'm not even convinced this is all sustainable long-term, if you really be quite frank.
Yeah, that's a whole other question. I think we've voiced that aloud on this and other podcasts on which both you and I have appeared, ad nauseum. Yeah, we're still trying to figure out an awful lot. The NCAA's president is putting out a recommendation for a subdivision, according to The Athletic and Yahoo News.
Get ready. It's coming. That separation's coming sooner than later.
It's still conceptual at this point, but I'm with you to act like there's not the sounds of planes coming for what is about to fly our direction, or a light of a train coming our way is not something we should be treating that way, is what I would say. To that, no, there's a lot of stuff there that makes a lot of sense what you said, Eric. And listen, coach's answer being we're working on it, I don't think that's necessarily news, right? This is a G5, air quotes, G5 team in its first year, and they're trying to compete. And while Gus Malzahn could be the best recruiter in the world, at some point he's going to run in what I'm going to call at this point the Dawkins paradigm.
No, I mean, you say it's not news, but I think it's candor, and I think some people needed to hear that because you remember this, Kyle. I wrote the column February-ish, I want to say, about Johnny Dawkins, how don't take it for granted. And the consensus of the column, which I think some people missed, okay? Some people took it as, oh, you're just defending Johnny Dawkins. I'm not just – that wasn't the point of the column. The point of the column was basketball. It was bigger than that, which is basketball does not have any budget support. The resources are not there for basketball. There were some that scoffed at that. Well, now you're hearing Gus Malzahn at football, King Football, right? The money maker, if you will, saying, I don't have enough resources. My question is, if they don't have enough resources, what makes you think other sports like basketball will? That's the point there. That's why I do think while it's not newsworthy, it is good to hear those coaches now coming to that answer. That Kelvin Sampson has said similar things, by the way, in Houston as well, about how they're playing catch-up. So this is not just a UCF thing either.
Right.
And my concern is, with this 12-team playoff that everybody loves so much, they're not going to like it so much when 8 to 9 teams are going to be Big Ten and SEC teams, and they start separating themselves from the rest of the pack, which is what's going to happen here. This is going to be – and look at the top 13 playoff rankings this year. Yeah. All those teams were either SEC, Big Ten, or are teams that are going to be in the SEC and the Big Ten. And I think that will continue because I think those two conferences are the ones that are going to dictate the terms and are the ones that most of them can support the finances that might be coming that you might need to keep your players or recruit players, et cetera, where this is headed in college athletics.
Well, and I think we're making a lot of assumptions too with this subdivision thing that I just mentioned. That's still kind of out in the wings. It's years away. I get that, but that's another change that's coming. There's already whispers about the almost inevitable implosion of the ACC that we've talked about on this show.
Oh, no doubt. There's no doubt now after this, what transpired on Sunday, that will definitely happen.
And then, things like the hemorrhaging of cash at ESPN and all the media networks, like how much are they willing to finance this circus?
That's a great point you just made there.
Yeah.
Because I hope these schools and conferences realize a decade from now, all that TV money you're getting right now may not be there.
Right.
In a decade, the way television is going. It's a great point you just made there.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of cluster there, 100%. But let's close out this portion of the conversation with this. I have 3 or 4 names that are here. Not all of them are UCF people, just people that have come up lately on the socials lately as to their recruitment. And remember, I say recruitment because you're also technically recruiting your own guys. That's what you hear the lament of in the NIL world. Let me lead off with this. Just give me a likelihood that you think they will, let's say, be a Knight next year, and how much of a fit they will be upcoming. And there's a reason I'm wording it that way. But I'll start off with this. I don't think this one's much of a fit question, but RJ Harvey, percentage likelihood you think he's coming back, Nick Porcelli?
Ooh. I don't want to say 50-50. Like, it probably should go. Me personally, I think I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to the draft because I think he can get drafted.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want me to give my percentage for? If he stays?
Percentage stays, yes.
Let's go 37%.
That he stays. That's okay. Pessimistic. I have a feeling Elo's going to match you. Where are you at with your percentage he stays?
I'm actually higher on that, way higher, because I disagree. I don't think he would get drafted in the NFL draft. I don't. I mean, you could tell me I'm wrong, Kyle, on that. To me, I don't think he's a draftable. He's more of a free agent right now in the NFL draft. Running backs are not a big priority in NFL drafts, as you know.
That's fair.
So I think to me, the question is, does he stay or go somewhere else maybe to try to get more NIL? I don't think so. I would assume he'll stay. I'm just going to bet on, I think he'll stay because I think there's something to be said to be comfortable in a situation where you're at and you're successful like RJ has been. And plus, the reason why I don't think, the other reason I would say he's not NFL, I don't think he's got to prove it more than a year. Don't you, Kyle, would agree that some NFL people would wonder about that considering his injury history?
Fair. I'm with you.
So I'll say this, his injury history is something that will be on the back of people's minds, but it's the kind of thing where people forget it really quickly unless they're actively hurt by something, right? So, for example, Adrian Pearson was freshly hurt. It impacted his draft stock. And then it all kind of went away until he got hurt again and then recovered from that. So in order to have had an injury history, which is now 2 years old, in fairness, having put up the season that he has, which isn't getting enough hype because he didn't make any conference lists for running over 1,200 yards.
I believe I had that one, by the way, Kyle. I believe we had that. Remember, we discussed that on the post-game night shift when we had our little argument about him, and I said I don't think he'll make all Big 12 first or second team.
Right.
He did make honorable mention.
Yeah, and in fairness, that's not a slight to him, nor this.
No, it's line. The league is stacked at running back, and I mean, he probably is the fifth best running back in that conference. Really, if you look at the backs that were taken over him, it's fair. I will say this: my percentage. I didn't give you a percentage. I'll say 55%. The only reason I don't go higher is I don't know the unknown about. Is there more out there? You know what I mean? Like, is there somebody out there that he might say, hey, if I go and maybe go to the portal, maybe somebody – I don't know that. So right. I'm not going to go – but I actually think there's a chance he stays.
I think there's some intangible scuttlebutt we don't know about him personally that's keeping him in the building other than he just good old-fashioned likes it here. I mean, that's something we hear all the time from anybody, but I think it actually matters a bit with him. I think that's kind of the situation, and that's just me making a read and speculate.
Well, and I'm going to give you credit for this. He doesn't have to decide now if he wants to go to the NFL draft. He can wait till after the bowl game, right? Like,
correct.
Because he could if he decides, hey, maybe I'll play the bowl game to see if my stock goes up. If
right.
So exactly. Let's keep that in mind. Like, just because you don't hear something now doesn't mean you won't hear something later in the month.
I also feel like there's a certain merit to being undrafted versus a late draft because you have a bit more saying where you could end up, and maybe if given choices, you can get yourself in a place that fits to where then you can appear in training camp and get your shot to make a difference, right? I'm with you, Elo. I'm going to round it up to 60%. I think he stays. I'm not going to go as far to say he's undraftable, but I'm with you. There's an awful lot of competition there. Like for all those that are out there in the mainstream, the best way to cite it is the quarterback class. It's very thick. This conference alone is very thick at running back, just the number of choices that you have. Let's wait till next year where some of these guys, may transfer or not be a thing, and hope that the benches in other parts of the Big 12 aren't quite as deep like that, or that you're not competing with Jordan McDonald or something like that, which obviously I think is a better back than Jordan McDonald today, which leads me to my next point. Maybe he just wants another season of film to show people, A, he's healthy, B, that he can be a more versatile back than an NFL back must be. I already think he's pretty versatile, don't get it twisted, but he was not used particularly often in the passing game, per se. If he can show that off, as well as continue to be an excellent option in protection, I think he's in a good place to improve his stock. I'll put it like that. Next name on the list, somebody that's also still in the building, Javon Baker. Eric, let me start with you.
This one's a tricky one because from what I understand, he can't transfer because he's already used that up. So he doesn't have leverage here. Now his choices are stay or go pro to the NFL draft. But again, I don't think he's a draftable receiver. There's tons of receivers that get drafted all the time in the NFL draft from all over the place. So I think Javon Baker is going to come down to who's the quarterback here next year. And I think that might play a role in his decision. So I'm going to say 51% either way there, depending on who the quarterback is.
Fair enough. Nick.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing as you, Elo. I might go a little high. I'm going to say 65. I didn't really think about it. What you just said there, it's going to depend on the QB. But yeah, no, that's 100% going to be determine it. But I mean, you never know with these guys. Some of them might be really confident in their abilities and think, hey, maybe I can just, fight and earn a spot if I go undrafted. But I don't see him being draftable right now. So I think he's better off coming back to UCF. So I'm going to say 65%. I think he'll come back.
I'm more sure of it. If I consider just what you guys are saying, I would go right up to 75. But there's a certain element of addiction by subtraction. How much are the coaches sick of these public outbursts on social media and these distractions and these things that are going on? I don't know if that's going to be a factor that plays here, so I can't go quite that high. I'm going to go straight 50-50. I don't know what to make of this kid, and who knows, at the end of the day, there may be somebody out there later on that needs a guy. He doesn't have to declare now is the point we make.
No, and he could play in the bowl game and declare afterwards. And remember, he could be like Snelson. Remember Snelson, Kyle?
Snelson, yes.
Declared, everybody was like, what? What is he doing? And then he didn't end up getting drafted. They weren't out. So just because we don't think the draft stock's very good for that particular player doesn't mean they won't jump, especially if they feel, hey, I'll prove you otherwise.
Yeah, it's a world where you can always declare. You can certainly try. Let's go to this. Let's go across the way to the other side of the field. His fellow receiver, Kobe Hudson. Likelihood he stays in the building quickly here. Lopez, what do you think?
Kind of like similar to Javon in that, who's the quarterback, right? Now, I think he's more likely to come back because he didn't have like a monster year. So what leverage does he have? But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, can both receivers come back? Is that realistic that you can keep both and keep both happy with whatever NIL and all that? I don't know. I'll go 60% he's back.
Nick?
I'm close to the same to you, Elo, 55. Like you said, not as much leverage. I think it's more likely we get him back. But again, there's just so much I don't know about him. So, yeah, I'm just going to try to stay in the middle, but lean toward more. He might come back.
I'm with you 100%, guys. I'm going to go 60 as well. He stays for the money that he might need. I think he would be in a position to get better NIL than Javon Baker because Kobe Hudson's much more appreciated by the fans. That being said, I can make the argument he's a bigger threat to leave than Javon Baker because at the end of the day, if a coach sees him for the potential long threat in his offense, they're going to make the play to try to recruit him. We'll see what happens there, though, overall. I'm with you on that. Let's go to somebody who's got a lot of scuttlebutt out there on the socials, who's made noise. This is a guy I've seen play in the Cure Bowl a couple times, successfully, at least one of them. And of course, I refer to former Coastal Carolina Chanticleer, who's declared for the transfer portal, Grayson McCall at quarterback. Eric, we have said time and again that the answer to UCF's quarterback situation may not be in the building yet. This would be that. Eric Lopez, what say you? Your percentage that they land Grayson McCall and what you fit?
Well, the McCall thing, I mean, that comes down to the finances, right? Like, can UCF get that down pat, or is somebody else going to offer him something better? Because remember, people forget this about Gus and the whole John Rice Plumlee thing. John Rice Plumlee was not his first choice. Remember, Michael Penix was one of the people that was first talked about coming here. And he ended up going to Washington. And what's he doing this weekend? Oh, he's in New York at the Heisman Trophy. Who was the next quarterback that was rumored to come here? Oh, Bo Nix, who Gus coached at Auburn. Oh, maybe he'll come here. Nope, ended up going to Oregon. Where's Bo Nix? Oh, the Heisman, again, in New York. So kind of worked out. So my point is, it's not a question of, do I think they'll get him? I don't know what the numbers are. Like, what is Grayson's options? What his offers are? I think the advantage that UCF might have is that maybe Grayson McCall, I don't think is rated very high as far as the quarterbacks in the portal because, again, he has an injury history at Coastal. He's missed time. And so there's questions there. Plus, he played in the Sun Belt, not at an elite conference level. So maybe you can get him and not, you might be able to afford him, which I hate saying that in college, but that's just what we are in today's day and age when you include NIL. But really, Kyle, you're the expert on Grayson McCall because of the three of us, you're the one that's seen him in person.
A couple times. But, Nick, real quick, before I do that, what say you?
I don't know if I can make a prediction because, like we keep saying, it's price.
2% chances. Like, do you like where is? Do you think what percent do you feel like they could land him? Do you think UCF is a viable candidate?
I mean, he's visiting here this weekend based on reports I've been seeing, so clearly he's interested. So yeah, there's obviously a chance, but yeah, can they afford him? Like, what are the other schools he's
Nick, just give up your tuition to him, please, so we can get our quarterback.
I'm struggling here, man. I don't think I can do that. I don't.
I mean, you could say 50-50. I won't judge you if you say that.
What were the schools he's looking at? I remember that there was like a list.
Well, NC State was one he visited as well. Remember, keep in mind, NC State, same state as Coastal Carolina. If you're talking geography, home field, type of deal. So ACC. I don't know what the other schools are that he's looking at. That's the thing. That's the unknown.
I'm only asking just because, right now, because I just don't know. I just want to take each school and say they all have an % chance. So I feel like the number is 3. So what is that? That's like 33%, 33.33.
So let me add this into that concept though. If you're an AC school right now trying to negotiate for any player, and the future's as confusing as it is, that's going to actually turn players away, in my opinion, right? Because unless you're going to be claiming this and that, but they're going to be reading headlines and not knowing what to think. What I can tell you is UCF stability-wise is going to be a lot more locked than, for example, an ACC or a former Pac-12 team, right? So with all the above in mind, now granted, a lot of the former Pac-12 has been cemented. I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but for my money, Grayson McCall, I think, is a fit in the system. However, actually getting him to come here is going to be a challenge to leave the state. I think he's definitely a 50-50 factor. Do I think he'll fit in Gus Malzahn's offense? Yes, I do. He's certainly he's not as fast as Plumlee. Let me be clear about that. But he is a gritty player. He's a bigger kid than Plumlee is, which, I mean, that's a low bar. I get it. But for my money, I feel like he's definitely that spiritual leader kind of, come and, let's win one guys kind of guy. I've seen it happen in person, and I don't necessarily think he's a bad decision maker. But I think you're going to see the same accuracy issues perhaps as he gets that same sort of chemistry and time to build with the receivers, but you won't have that second year to see, oh my gosh. That being said, I am curious to see what Darren Hoodshaw would do with them. Eric, did you have another point?
Well, the only thing I'll push back is I think in this case with McCall, who only has 1 year left of eligibility, I don't think the future of the ACC is relevant in that, because the ACC will be around next year. Now, whether it's around after that, I don't know. And if it was a player that has multiple years of eligibility or recruit high school kid, I think that's a fair point to make to use as an advantage if you're UCF. But because he's a 1 year rental, I don't think that comes into play as far as the future of the cut.
It doesn't. No, and first of all, your point's completely valued for the player himself. But as far as what they're doing with revenue and resources to bring other guys in and struggle with that, that's impacted. So there's kind of an indirect factor. But you're right. For 1 year guys, it doesn't hit them as hard. That's a fine retort. So I'll leave all of that at that. So at the end of the day, listen, like we've reminded you a couple times, nothing is in stone. Signing day is next Wednesday. Let's see what happens. And of course, all that football talk, we would be remiss if we didn't bring up Nick Porcelli being there in person for the presser leading up to the bowl game, which you can find on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube page. Bing! I need to commission a Bing soundbite. I don't have that like Jeff does. And speaking of things that need a soundbite for the Black and Gold Banneret, blackandgoldbanneret.com is where you'll find Elo's article where he referenced Johnny Dawkins and how important he is. Bing! So make sure you check those out as well. The supplemental study materials as provided by the student of the game, because Jeff Sharon isn't here this time. Hope everything's okay with him as he's on assignment. But all that being said, when I say Nick Porcelli in this room, gentlemen, I think UCF basketball, a little bit of up and down here lately for the men here. Walk us through. I know everybody, there were many laments when it came to the Hatters putting a cap on UCF most recently here. And then there have been some games since then. But what exactly happened? Can you just, I know it's been a while. We missed last week, obviously, doing the pod. Can you just give me a brief synopsis of why, as you were there?
simple thing. They couldn't stop the 3-point shot. Stetson just got hot in the second. Because for the majority of the game, the Knights were up. They were doing fine. But then they couldn't. And they told me this after the game. They had a plan, stop the 3-point shooting, because Stetson, I believe, might be in the top 50, maybe even top 25 in 3-point shooting in the country this year.
Oh, okay.
They couldn't. I'm going after what Coach Dawkins told me.
And they couldn't.
They couldn't stop it.
By the way, if you want to see that conversation with Coach Dawkins, you can look for that also on the Black and Gold Banneret Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel. Bing. Excuse me, Nick.
There you go. Yeah. So they, just to put it simply, they couldn't stop the 3-point shot, and that really sucked because that was the night that Oh my God. Sorry, I had a blank there. Just had to pull up. I just needed. Yeah, there it is. So before the game, I said if they want to win, you need to let Jalen Sellers cook. He cooked. He scored a career-high 34 points, but we weren't allowed to celebrate that because they couldn't stop Stetson from shooting 3-pointers. And as a result, a 20-game winning streak against the Hatters was broken.
Yeah.
The last time they lost to Stetson, they were in the A-Sun. I was not alive.
Rub that in there. By the way, I'm going to, Eric, real quick, I know there's some history with the coaching staff there with UCF.
Well, yeah, Donnie Jones, obviously the head coach at Stetson there, and so that certainly didn't help the fact you lost to them. Look, I mean, but Nick, to Nick's point, UCF this year has struggled guarding the 3-point line. They've given up more threes on average on the 3-point line this year compared to last year. I believe teams were shooting around 35% from the 3-point line against UCF versus 30 last year. UCF, now this was after the Stetson game. UCF was giving up an average of over 71 points a game versus 6 more than last year. Now the good news is since then against Lipscomb and Jacksonville, that has improved because they've done well defensively there. They've dominated. Their bench production, which has also been a key factor of this team. For them to be successful, they've gotten good bench production. The problem is, guys, we're not in the A-Sun Conference anymore.
I knew this.
So the real test comes Sunday.
It's coming.
Sunday. Ole Miss, 8-0 with Chris Beard as their head coach. Who's Chris Beard? He's been a Final Four head coach who is coached at Texas Tech within literally an instant replay away of winning a national title. And then at Texas, then obviously there were some off-the-court discretions there that kind of led to his ouster there at Texas, and that's why he's in his first year here at Ole Miss. But they're 8-0, and his coaching style is basically what we're going to see in the Big 12 on a nightly basis. So to me, this is an ultimate test before you get into Big 12 play in January of what it's going to be like in the Big 12. So I'm really intrigued, guys, on how UCF will come out Sunday against Ole Miss, and have they improved on some of the areas that they needed to work on following the Stetson game in these last 2 games. We've seen some positive developments, but the level of competition goes up a different level with Ole Miss, because I'm telling you, Ole Miss, I watched them against Memphis a week ago. They are really good. And you know who they also just got back eligible, that the NCAA just got declared eligible? Musa Cisse. Why is that name familiar, you might ask? Well, UCF dealt with Musa Cisse last year when UCF played Oklahoma State at the Baja semifinal. Cisse was the star big man with Oklahoma State, had his shot blocked near the end of the game by C.J. Walker. Well, as of now, we don't think we'll have C.J. Walker for Sunday. So I'm telling you, this is a big test for UCF Sunday, Nick. And I think that's the question, Nick. You've been around them. Have they resolved and fixed these issues? You've been at the games. What have you seen that has been improved that gives you optimism that they have fixed some of those things, and we'll see that on Sunday?
The thing is, they've shown me that they can play a style of game where they can beat Ole Miss. They showed it in their last game last night when they just destroyed Jacksonville. Omar Payne was part of one of the many guys who destroyed his former team. Because he used to be.
You mentioned that Jacksonville team, Nick. I remember last year they got stupid hot from 3 and almost beat UCF. And I'm glad you brought up the percentage and the more shots made and all that other stuff. Stetson's an anomaly. So too was Jacksonville. Again, honestly, the very strangely named Jacksonville Dolphins. Yeah, that doesn't mess with my head as an NFL guy, but I digress. Them bombing it from 3, they were incredibly effective. I want to say it was like a 2-bucket game, something like that. It was a pretty close outcome, and I remember Coach Dawkins coming out that one with the sigh of relief and acknowledging how much the hoop was on their side, how the ball was going down. Obviously, the Stetson game, they weren't able to bounce back from that in the same fashion. So there's a little bit of that Jacksonville history there. I wanted to throw that in there real quick. But yeah, to Eric's point, did you see anything that might get them, let's just say, ready to go for Sunday? Did you see any of that patched up?
It's weird. I don't like Ole Miss is obviously they have more talent, as we said. We're not in the A-Sun. They're a way more talented team. So they're going to be a team that's tougher to guard. What I will say is coming off of the Stetson game, the reasons that they lost that game, you could see them working to improve it against Lipscomb and against Jacksonville. In the Lipscomb game, it was in the face of adversity because in the Stetson game, there was a point where like they were coming back and it looked like UCF is panicking. And that's one of the reasons they lost. A similar thing was happening with Lipscomb, but they were able to overcome it and eventually just kind of break away. And then when they had to go face Jacksonville, they didn't need to face adversity because they just improved on, they made it impossible for them to shoot. This is how good of a defensive game, excluding a pair of free throws that Jacksonville made. They did not make their first basket until over 9 minutes had passed in the first quarter. UCF went 9 minutes without giving up a bucket.
That's significant.
Yeah. They came in after the game. I believe it was either Omai or Payne or Silla. They came in and they said, "We're not happy with our first half performance. Why? We gave up 18 points. It should have been 15." Yeah.
I don't think it's an accident that it's a 3-point shot. That was the difference there, of course, as mentioned by both Elo and Nick Porcelli here. Sunday will mark Ole Miss versus
big game. I hope people come out. This is a very important game because I do think, Ole Miss is good. I would not be surprised if they're an NCAA tournament team. Chris Beard likes to run a motion offense, so I'm going to be curious how the defense handles that. They're also very physical defensively. Don't be surprised if it gets a little chippy depending on how the officials officiate this game, which I know, Kyle, you're a big fan of the college basketball officiating there. So I think there's a couple things, and a couple names to keep in mind. Alan Flanagan is their leading scorer at Ole Miss, averaging 18 points a game. Matthew Murrell, 16 a game. Jalen Murray, 15 points a game. So, again, the perimeter is going to be challenged. I can't wait. I think, to me, this is the game I've circled. It's kind of that underrated game that people kind of, when you're looking at the Big 12 schedule, and obviously the news came out this week that the Kansas game is sold out. No surprise there.
Right.
This is the non-conference. A lot of people circled Miami. I circled this game as kind of a great barometer to see where we're at before we start Big 12 play here in less than a month.
No, that's a great point, too. I'm more confident, oddly enough, with a Johnny Dawkins team. I'm more comfortable in the front court, even without C.J. Walker, than I am in the back court currently, based on what we've seen. Nick, go ahead, put a bow on it.
To put it, my view of this game is that this game is where we're really going to see what kind of team this is, because it's still kind of early. And as I mentioned, they've been inconsistent. They lose to Stetson, and then they blow out Jacksonville. They're kind of up and down. This is where they're going to show what kind of team they are. It's that simple.
Well, all their offensive guys have to step up. You can't just depend on Jalen Sellers. That was an issue at the Stetson game. That was an issue.
They need to limit their mistakes. They've been doing that a lot. They've struggled a little bit with turnovers. A lot of games, it's just they've been the more talented team, so they've been able to make it to where that's not that big of a deal. It's going to be a big deal when you play a team like Ole Miss that can match your talent and arguably has more.
And so if you're handing them chances, it'll hurt worse. I totally get where you're coming from there. With that in mind, let's go ahead and wrap up basketball, talking about the ladies real quick. They did go to Puerto Rico in Thanksgiving, swept that tournament, did their job, went 3-0 coming out of that. And just when it looked like they might lose a game to Campbell, they go on a 12-2 run to finish out the contest. and win the game by a point, 41-42. This team started out averaging like 95 points, and now it's 41-42. What are we doing here? What just happened? I can answer that for you quickly if you didn't see the game. The 3-point shot wasn't falling like it had been in other games. 4 of 18, they were on the night and shooting on a total 23% from the field. Not great, Bob. The thing that saved them is they got to the line a lot. Yeah, they missed 5 free throws, but they took 17 free throw shots, made 12 of them, and handled business like one would hope. They do. H.L. Lacotte with 9 rebounds in this game too. Of course, they out-rebounded Campbell significantly. That was a big part of the defensive effort. And just coming out, playing tough defense and handling business when the shots didn't go down. Listen, good teams need to win games like that. But Eric Lopez, I know you're going to make the point for me. That ain't no Big 12 opponent. And I think Coach Messer and company are very well aware of that fact.
Well, and they shot 23% from the floor in that game, and somehow won that game. Man, that's not going to work in the Big 12. Look, 7-0. I think we could say 2 things here. They're way improved, much improved from last year, right?
Oh, 100%.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
I would have expected them to be improved. I don't know that I would have predicted undefeated after 7.
Yeah, like you say 7-0. They just tied the record for best start in school and program history.
Yeah, great point.
However,
for that.
Okay, now I'm going to go the cynical route.
No, I know.
Fair balance over here. 7-0. It was the 317th toughest schedule in the country. There's 330 Division I teams. 317. Not tough. But I understand why she scheduled the way she did. She's trying to build some confidence in this group to go into the Big 12. I'm not critical. I'm just saying, Paul.
No, I'm with you on that.
I think part of it as well, though, Eric. I think part of it is her testing lineups, seeing what works, who's best to pair. Yeah, I mean, I've seen her run small ball groups. I've seen a group that I would call like, you got a relay track team in the shot putter with Jayla Kelly, and then some of the guards and forwards there, too. Like there's a whole lot going on. And she also has a lot of versatile players. Where do they best fit? The tough thing about a versatile player sometimes, a player who's positionless, is they don't necessarily have a best position. So, it's about trying to.
Let me ask you both this. Yeah. I think we all agree to this point. Jalen Sellers is the best player on the men's team.
Right.
Any disagreements here?
No.
Kyle?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I'm a buyer for Sellers. You got me.
Oh, they see.
You set me up. I was going to let it go.
I did set you up. My question, both of you, who's the best player so far? Based on what you all have seen, who's the best player in the women's team right now?
I got Maya Burns.
I might have to say that too. I don't know. I've been debating that all the time, and honestly, I think my opinion on that's going to change like daily, but devoid of long argument.
Over Peterson, because Peterson has shown. I mean,
it's her Burns. That's what I'm going back and forth.
Kayla Peterson is a scoring beast, but the little things and somebody who does everything. Listen, and the first game I covered for the ladies was when Maya Burns came out and was like 5 for 12 at one point in the game and still was on the floor because she was doing all the other little things, grabbing boards, getting steals, and also as a force as a team leader as well, too. And, obviously you would want to mention Layla Jewett as a possibility if you're looking for 3.
Been a nice story coming back from a serious injury, by the way, Jewett.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who the previous coaching staff who recruited her told me she would be a big factor in the future of this program, and it's showing that we're seeing what they were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Coach A believes she's one of the returners and has an impact immediately, was a big star in the conference tournament win last year, all of it. I mean, I'm taking nothing from Layla, and she's certainly still a leading force. To hear Coach and the other players talk about how shy Layla is less of a thing than ever before is all a factor. But you want a scoring machine, you want Caitlin doing the thing, you feel free to pick her. But I think as far as an overall all-around player, Caitlin Peterson doesn't get that hot unless there's a Maya Burns on the floor. That's where I live.
But Peterson might be the biggest key to this offense. It seems like this offense goes as she goes. If she's having a great night, the offense, right? So I mean, it's very interesting. Very interesting.
No, actually, if you've looked at scoring, and there have been nights where she's been electric. Let's not be silly. She comes out the gate scoring over 30 points. It's amazing. But there have been nights where she got slow, and her teammates, the Maya Burnses, the H.L. Lacotts, the other players, I'll just say, have stepped up. The Layla Jewitts have stepped up, have had big quarters, waiting for her to get hot, and then like in the third or fourth quarter, she'll show up to close the game out or lead a team or lead the team to take the lead so somebody else can. They have the difference between the women's team and the men's team outright is they have all sorts of factors that can do it for you and still play incredibly physical ball, thanks to ACOT and of course Jayla Kelly, who I'm already a big fan of because, well, I needed somebody to fill the void for Destiny Thomas. Anyways, with all that in mind, before we change out here, Nick, thanks for talking some basketball. We're going to transition to the guy who's going to be at the next women's game on Monday, Bryce. Take us through some of the other Olympic action as I try to figure out. There we go. I'm a host, not a producer. I'm just saying. With all that in mind, Bryson, welcome in, sir. Of course, we mentioned you'd be covering the women there in person on Monday. That's going to be fun. We'll be looking forward to hearing about that from you on next week's Night Shift. But there's been an awful lot of postseason action in some of the Olympic sports. It's only fitting we bring you in as, by the way, check out his weekly stuff with the Nightcap. If you get a hold of your life and want to get your Olympic stuff in, blackandgoldbanneret.com. Bing! Bryson Turner, of course, the wordsmith for all that. But yeah, all this action. Volleyball had their postseason. There was stuff going on there. Catch us up a little bit, brother.
Yeah, finally you mentioned the nightcap. That was the last one for the 2023 calendar year because now the Olympic sports are all wrapped up with volleyball now finishing off their season in what was a pretty bizarre ending again on the road against Kansas, where they almost had a set to get to win to tie the game up, but then the point got reversed, which was honestly quite odd to me. And so Kansas ended up stealing that set, which already had gone over the 25 points automatically. It already went over in an extra time, basically.
Yeah, and Kansas then got like 2-3 more points, won it in 4 sets. And that was it. Fitting end, though, because they lost their last 8 matches of the season. They ended up losing, I believe, 10 of the last 11. Missed the NCAA tournament. 7 teams from the Big 12 got in. Texas is the only one playing in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, so it's kind of unique for the Big 12. Here's the bow on the on volleyball season, real quick. Rebuilding season, so all things considered, pretty good from that standpoint. But now the biggest question moving forward for this program: can they win without McKenna Melville and get to the NCAA tournament? The last 15 seasons of UCF volleyball without McKenna Melville. You know how many NCAA tournaments they've made? 1. That was in 2014. With McKenna Melville, they were 5 for 5. That question is out there. It's not my question. It's the question of the volleyball media that actually covers the sport year-round. That is the question with UCF volleyball next year and beyond. The good news is the person that found McKenna Melville was Jenny Maurer, who is currently the head coach. That's the big question for this offseason and moving forward with volleyball. And obviously they're going to have to replace their middles. So a lot of questions.
And from a conference standpoint, you have to think some other teams are going to be falling off too. You got 7 reps in the tournament in the conference. That's a tough world to try to rebuild it. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Well, I agree. The good news is Texas leaves. They've been the dominant program in Big 12 volleyball. They won the national title last year. They've won the last 7 or 8 Big 12 titles. They'll be moving to the SEC. Arizona State comes into the league. They're in the second weekend as well. So it's going to be strong. Look, volleyball is a power force. This ain't the American, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to volleyball. And me and Jeff used to have this argument because he felt that volleyball didn't get the respect. And I said, yeah, because you play in a garbage league in the American. And now we've seen the difference. And so that's the jury's out with volleyball. But again, tough circumstances for Jenny Maurer taking over late in April. Really not a lot she could do when Todd decided to go coach in a pro league that may or may not work. Mm-hmm. And so to me, though, that's the big jury's out on the volleyball program post McKenna Melville. there's no guarantee they will be successful post Melville. They remind me a lot of the Miami Dolphins post Dan Marino era.
I hope it's not that bleak.
Well, they're a very young team, Eric. They're a very young team. I honestly, like, if anything, I like what we saw this season out of new setter Abby Shomers and Ava Armour. I think that there's a little something there with that.
She's good. She was a bright spot. She was a bright spot.
On that concept, because this is a question I generally had just as somebody who's a general sports person. I obviously don't follow volleyball as closely as you nor Eric, but in my mind, you got a younger group. You're trying to replace a legacy. We'll call. I think it's fair to call Melville iconic at the program, right?
I would say this: McKenna Melville is probably the most valuable player to their respective program of any athlete at UCF ever.
That's a hell of
Others, think about it. As great as UCF softball is with Stephanie Best, they've won with other great players, right? Football has had Dante Culpepper, as great as he is. They've won with Kevin Smith. They've won with KZ. They've won with Blake Bortles. Go through the sports. In the last 20 years, only one player has won consistently with their sport. That is McKenna Melville with volleyball. They have not won consistently without her. That's a fact.
But with that very eloquent fact pointed out, here's my question then. Has this young team done enough in this season to kind of show that respect like Bryson's talking about? Bryson, did they leave a mark and impression that you got us this year, but we coming? Do you get that feeling from this group?
I think that because remember, we highlighted the gauntlet day one, not even before day one. We were highlighting the gauntlet and how it was going to be an extremely tough schedule. And I think I even joked that I thought that they might not even win any of those games, which ended up being almost right. We only won one of them.
Yeah, good job for jinxing them, Bryson.
Well, I didn't want it to happen. I'm just saying, like, the way that the schedule worked out, those were some of the top teams in the Big 12. And, playing them's going to be tough, even if they come here. But they won every single game before that, which tells me that even without McKenna Melville, they're about mid-pack in the Big 12, which, given how much an icon that McKenna Melville was, if that's the first year after her and you're mid-pack in one of the best volleyball conferences in the country, then I'll take that for year one without her. But now to next year, if you're going to want to try to be make a little bit more noise, or at least stay relatively similar, because of course, you got to replace both of your middles, and middles are kind of a huge deal with the Big 12. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Coach Maurer went to the portal on that, honestly.
I agree with everything Bryson just said. I'll add this. You need a marquee play in volleyball. You need marquee players on the outside. They have a good group, but you got to get that marquee player, whether it's Ava Armour developing, whether it's getting somebody in the portal. And we talked about this earlier in the show, Kyle, about the NIL money and the impact and how you got to be economical if you're UCF. You don't have all these. You almost have to be like the Tampa Bay Rays. That applies across the board to volleyball too. Trust me. Volleyball, there's a ton of money being spent. Big Ten, for example, spends a ton of money on volleyball. So can they do that? Again, Jenny Maurer has been the recruiter. I think she can, but it's going to take some time. It's not going to be easy. It could take a while. They were picked 9th in the preseason and finished 9th, to Bryson's point.
So there you go. A great way to wrap up on volleyball. Bryson, if there's, unless you mentioned the Olympic sports here wrapping up at this juncture, although that is true, some schedules came out for Eric's house, the Sultan of Stickball in the building. First of all, let's start with baseball, and then of course, well, I don't say of course, you'll take it there from there to softball. But when you saw these schedules drop, what kind of jumps off the page for you?
So looking at the baseball schedule, and that ended up coming out. So I'm very interested because it's a lot of new faces for this UCF team. We are going to see South Florida again. I remember we were talking about what sports are we going to see South Florida continue to do in this new era in the Big 12? Well, in year one, USF is going to be coming here to play baseball in the third non-conference weekend of the season.
I have to be honest. I if there was a sport that I thought USF would come back into play, I thought it would be stickball. I say that meaning it could have been softball or baseball. So yeah, I'm less shocked, I guess, but I mean the fans are digging it, right, Bryson?
Oh yes, I got to imagine that's very nice to have. Looking through the quality of opponent, though, I'm looking at for weekend series. By the way, not counting midweek games, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 NCAA tournament teams out of the coming over for weekend series, which are a home series against Samford. Oh man, I remember that series from a couple of years ago. That was disastrous. Away we have
baseball trauma.
Yeah, I know that was not fun. We have an away series against Oklahoma. That's actually opens Big 12 play for UCF, so that's an introduction to the Big 12 right there. You have a home matchup against Oklahoma State, who was finished 23 in the RPI last year. That's going to be a big one. Mm-hmm. You have Texas Tech coming to town, finished 37 in the RPI. And then on the road to West Virginia you're going, and then you have a few more weeks, and then you got Texas in the last home weekend series. They finished 21 in the RPI. Out of all of these, Texas is actually the one that did the best in the postseason, making it to the Stanford Super Regional. So I think that this is a very good schedule for a first-year coach like Rich Wallace, because this is a schedule that I think will be able to test him, but at the same time, it's not going to overwhelm the players. Like with volleyball, for instance, when we looked at the volleyball schedule and we saw the gauntlet, we're thinking, oh man, this is going to be a really tough stretch for this team, especially given the transition that it's going through. This schedule, on the other hand, I think is much more adept for a first-year coach like Rich Wallace, where have those moments where you have some winnable games, but then you have those moments where you can test the team, but it just doesn't come so often that it's going to there's stress tests and not like they're going to break you like they did like the volleyball team did late in the game.
Litmus test rather than pure stress test. I see.
Litmus, that was the word I was looking for.
So, yeah, with that in mind, I mean, Eric, he pointed out, the number of challenging things that jump off the schedule for baseball. What jumps off to you? What's something that you would point out here?
Well, the fact Texas comes here. Texas is arguably a top 3 program in the history of college baseball. Like, it's them, Miami, and USC, maybe.
So others. You're telling me
LSU as well.
If Bryson cut me a check this year, this would be a good time to accept it, to go check out some baseball.
That would be, yeah. Big 12 baseball a little different with Texas and Oklahoma State. I mean, that's a good home slate. Like I said, Texas, that's a once, and it's probably never going to happen again because, again, Texas is in their last year.
Big 12.
The Big 12 before going to the SEC. So that could be a lot there. And obviously, with Rich Wallace, it'll be interesting to see how they prepare in the non-conference and find some pitching. But we'll get to more of that after the new year. But Texas and Oklahoma State at home is pretty darn good. Like, Oklahoma State has been the Big 12 champions the last couple of years. So, woo, that's box office.
And by the way,
I see the finger jumping up, put a bow on it.
And by the way, the season opening series, opening night, former Knight versus former Knight. Ryan Klosterman brings Bryant to town. So that'll be a nice little way to kick off the season. Rich Wallace versus Ryan Klosterman. How's that?
What better way to start a season than night-on-night crime? I see where you're going, Bryson. Definitely a storyline there. But listen, I'm going to be selfish here. I'm going to raise my stock in the sports world just by association, because I'm going to ask the great Eric Lopez, the Sultan of Stickball, the man who calls the games at softball, what he thinks of the softball schedule here as it dropped recently.
Well, this schedule is by far, no UCF team has a stronger schedule in their sport than softball. I'm going to read you this slate right here. Ready for this? From February 14th, Valentine's night. I know it's a special night for all of you. going up until February 24th. UCF will host Liberty, which is a regional final team. Go to Clearwater for the marquee ESPN tournament, where they will play Wisconsin out of the Big Ten, North Carolina out of the ACC, Kentucky out of the SEC, UCLA in primetime on Sunday night, February 18th, the powerhouse Bruins out of the Pac-12, whatever you want to call it. Then they go out to California, does UCF, to play in the second marquee tournament of the sport in softball, the Mary Nutter Classic in California, where they'll play Mississippi State, SEC, Oregon out of the Pac-12, Missouri, SEC, Oregon State, Pac-12, the defending SEC champions, Tennessee. Do you get the drift here? UCF will actually have the only team in the country that could say they're playing the Big Ten regular season champions in Northwestern, the SEC regular season champions in Tennessee, the Pac-12 regular season champions in UCLA, and oh, by the way, they're going to play the three-time defending national champion and Big 12 champions, Oklahoma, in conference play at the Plex. Hello.
And that's the home finale, by the way. That Oklahoma series is going to be senior night.
Senior weekend with Oklahoma. Texas comes to the Plex. I mean, you talk about hitting the jackpot financially. Oklahoma and Texas both coming to your house. That is massive. I'm not sure how many UCF teams could say that. That could have both OU and Texas. Two teams are going to be top 5 probably in the preseason polls. UCF will get to host both. They'll also host BYU and former Knight. Matty Bejarano had the famous base hit to tie it up and win it in the regionals against Michigan. So you get my drift here. This is a lethal, vicious schedule that has his highs and lows here for this experienced group of UCF Knights that are shooting big. I watched them at the scrimmage last week, and there's the most talented UCF team in softball's ever put out on the field. But does it all fit? And how will they handle this schedule? Be fascinating to see.
Biggest challenge. That's how you want to see it match. Go ahead and add, Bryson.
I think what really helps, though, with softball is very interesting in that they have these tournaments that, because I feel like that unlike other team sports, like basketball, I think is the only other sport, the college sport I've seen do this, where they have these regular season tournaments that are tailor-made for you to get multiple marquee matchups, so you can then focus on scheduling other games around that. Because they have Liberty as a warm-up, but before Liberty, you don't have an RPI higher than 75 in the first couple of games of the season. Then you have the marquee matchups from Liberty through the tournaments, and then you have their kind of prep for Big 12 action against UNF, Princeton, Kennesaw, Bethune, and Stetson, with a good test against South Carolina, to be sure. But most of those are schools, aside from South Carolina, have RPIs last year of 100 or higher before you get into Big 12 play. So I feel like that softball has a very solid sense of where, like, you have those higher marquee opponents, and then you have the kind of the more, what's the best way? The sit back and try some stuff to see what works kind of opponents,
Peaks and valleys, so it looks like something like a P90X workout where you're trying really hard and then resting in the meantime. No, I see where you're going. And if you're going to do it, there's a school of thought that says that is the way to do it. Eric Lopez put a bow on it. What exactly, I mean, just off the cuff, I know we'll be doing more analysis as the season approaches, but is tournament aspiration reasonable for this team? You mentioned them having the toughest schedule. You also mentioned the most talent. Where you see all shaking out?
Well, you got 12 seniors right there. I think part of the reason why Coach Paul Malone is scheduled this way is you got 12 seniors. Remember what this group has done. They've hosted a regional. They've been to a super regional. This is probably your best shot to make a deep run in the postseason. I think what she's trying to shoot for, if this works out and you win the right games and enough games, not only are you making the tournament, but you're putting yourself in position to host and maybe as a high seed, not necessarily a 16, and maybe get that track to Oklahoma City. I think it's a boom or bust type of deal. I could see them getting that high seeded hosting. The risk is if it doesn't work out and you don't win the right games, you could be out of the tournament completely. But it's the gamble worth taking, because I would rather overschedule and let my players decide my fate of how good are we than going the soft approach. When you have a great team, you schedule soft, and then you complain, well, why did I get seeded that way? That's unfair. I didn't get to host like other sports has happened.
Or moreover, if you get exposed later as a team that's
about right, exactly.
And let's not forget that over the course of this year, we saw those renderings of Plex redesigns. I got to think that, Sonny Ball Malone really wants to get a lot of support coming in. Like,
they're going to have to. I mean,
Texas and Oklahoma coming in, that could draw a lot of people. And I bet you Coach Ball Malone is fighting for Plex, Plex upgrades like volleyball has been getting with the venue recently.
Oh, if you only knew the story. Yes, that is a very much a concern that I have, is because I was there for the Florida fall ball game this fall where it was packed. There's nowhere to put people. They better have a plan for Texas and Oklahoma. It's a great point, Bryson. Like, if we want to invite Kyle to come out, we better find a spot for him. And I don't know if we have a spot for him for Texas, Oklahoma, unless we just told him, hey, can you hang out with us and hang out with the fans in Left Field Lounge, and you'll get a free beverage and food if you mention my name. That's about all I can promise.
That's the whole reason I posed the question you personally here on this podcast. While Jeff is out, I had the opportunity to know who I need to talk to. Listen,
they probably ought to whip out those regional stands, those extra stands they had for the regional a couple years ago.
There you go. At any rate, an honor, joy, and privilege to step in to do the hosting duties here for Jeff Sharon tonight. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. Find me on Twitter at the SOTG. Eric Lopez at Eric Lopez Elo. That's Eric with a C. If you don't know already, it's Bryson Turner as well on Twitter. Is, of course, the great Bryson Turner. Of course, Nick Porcelli, too, on Twitter is also Nick Porcelli. Thanks to Nick for doing what he did with the baseball and basketball segments. Thanks to Bryson Turner for stepping in and wrapping up Olympic sports as well as helping with stickball. And thank you to Eric Lopez, the Sultan of Stickball, and his work on the other stuff throughout the podcast. But until next time, everybody, hopefully Jeff will be back. We'll see you for the next edition of Night Shift. And until such time, class dismissed.